Welcome to the Insider Track, and today we're talking all things Newcastle United and what is going to be a very exciting summer for you Newcastle fans after a very exciting season where you've gone from nearly getting into the Champions League. We'll wait and see if that happens because your budget and your transfer targets could be very different if you are in Europe's elite competition than if you are not. But before we move on and look at some of the targets your club are looking at, please make sure you subscribe. Most people who watch our videos do not subscribe, so please hit that subscribe button. There's a wee icon in the bottom corner there, or you can subscribe on our channel. Alright, I'll move on, I'll shut up. Let's get on and have a look at Newcastle United's transfer targets. Eddie Howe is set to strengthen in a number of areas, probably most areas of the pitch, but as reported on before, the left-back position is an area that Eddie Howe wants to strengthen. Big Dan Burn, as he's known by the Newcastle faithful, has been at left-back for Newcastle all season, a centre-back by trade, but he's had a phenomenal season for Newcastle. He's filled in fantastically for them. However, it's understood that Dan Burn would like to be seen as a guy that could come in with the centre-backs rather than having to play out of position as a left-back, and then could be used perhaps as someone who could be a backup left-back if needed. Kieran Tierney at Arsenal has been looked at by Newcastle, has been watched by Newcastle, and is among their targets, as we reported before. That has not changed, despite the fact that Kieran Tierney has obviously had some starts recently, has got himself back in the squad. He wants more playtime, we understand, and it would be keen for him to have more of a kind of role in a squad where he's a key man, and under Newcastle you could see that happening with playing for Eddie Howe. And obviously he's had his injury issues, but he's a player that Arsenal, we would believe, would be willing to let go for the right price. So one to watch absolutely is the Scotland international Kieran Tierney. Now, let's just touch on James Maddison. I'm not going to go from back to front. It's going to be kind of all over the place here, but just stick with me as we'll go through a list of players. Let's talk about James Maddison. Recent reports have said that Tottenham are leading the race, and Tottenham are extremely keen. They're also watching Ward-Prowse at Southampton too, but let me suggest that Newcastle are not out of the James Maddison race at all. He has been a key target for Newcastle United for a long time. In January, they still liked him, but they were never going to go for him in January because they kept their spending down so that they can go for it this summer. They also have to work in the parameters of financial fair play. They have to work in the parameters of Premier League regulations when it comes to finances too. However, James Maddison is a target for Newcastle. That is an area of the pitch they are looking to strengthen, and the England international, the man that is set to hit his last year of his contract at Leicester City, will leave Leicester this summer. That is a fact. He will leave Leicester this summer. It's just where does he go? And right now Newcastle and Tottenham are battling each other for his signature, but Newcastle have been in that race for a long time, have been working on that for a long time, and Tottenham will be making a late dart, if you like, into this bid. Newcastle are still the favourites as far as I'm concerned, and from what I'm hearing, for James Maddison's signature. So that one is still one to watch, and is still one that could happen. Let's stick in the midfield, shall we? And we'll talk about, quickly, Declan Rice. Are Newcastle in the race for Declan Rice? Arsenal still lead that race. Arsenal have been in a strong position for Declan Rice for a long time. That has not changed. Chelsea are also keen on him, but could go to the likes of Moises Caicedo instead at Brighton. Newcastle have been linked. Newcastle have looked at him, and I think that's a project that would actually interest Declan Rice. But my understanding is Rice would actually much prefer to stay in London. He likes living there, likes being there, and Arsenal are front runners. However, Manuel Ugarte, who is a player at Sporting Lisbon, is a player that Newcastle looked at in January, have scouted and have watched. They've also looked at another player at Sporting who we'll get to shortly. But Ugarte is a player that they have scouted, watched and looked at, considered in January. However, the January price wouldn't have been able to match up to their idea of spending less, so it didn't happen. Ugarte's only 21 years old, the Uruguay international, and he's massively impressed Under Armour on at Sporting Lisbon. You obviously seen him against Arsenal in the Europa League when the plaudits came his way, and Twitter blew up about how good he is. Well, Newcastle are obviously not the only side looking at him. I understand Real Madrid have also had a little glance in his direction too, and he is a player that is likely to leave Sporting for a good amount of money in the summer. Sporting Lisbon could command up to about 50 million euros for him if they really, really wanted to. Why 50 million euros? You might think that's far too much money. Well, he's contracted till 2026. They see him as a very, very high value player. They see him as a player who's only going to get better, and he's their player. They've got a right to ask for what they want. And nowadays in football, when you've got an asset that's 20 21 years old like Urgart, playing full-time for his country, playing European football, being spoken about in such high regard all over the football world. They know that they can make money off of him, and they're not going to sell for little. And Portuguese clubs are very good at getting their money's worth for their players, i.e. Enzo Fernandez going to Chelsea. But this is a player that Newcastle have looked at. I don't anticipate at this point in time, things change fast in football, Newcastle beating Arsenal or Chelsea to Declan Rice's signature. That just feels like that's something, or what it sounds like from what we're hearing, is that Declan Rice is already quite far down the line with those two. However, this is an option for Newcastle. This is one that could absolutely happen. And do you know what? He ticks so many boxes for Eddie Howe. He's the type of player you can see in his squad. He's hard-working. He's good with the ball at his feet. He transitions the ball forward really well. He's got a mentality of team spirit, getting better. He's young. He can only improve. Ticks so many Eddie Howe boxes. He's an Eddie Howe player. And I think Newcastle will try to make this happen. Or at least will put some feelers out. Make some noises. And see what's going on. We do know that they've watched him. We do know that they liked him in January. And let's see what happens in summer. But Urgart to Newcastle was still absolutely one to watch. One coming in from the left wing here in terms of the name of the player is Kvaratskhelia at Napoli. I know what you're thinking. Fraser, you're talking nonsense. And I said this before. My understanding is Newcastle actually do kind of believe they could maybe make this happen. It would depend on if they get the Champions League. Absolutely no doubt about that. Napoli want to extend his contract. That could still happen. And he's not going to be cheap, obviously. You're looking at 100 million odd for Kvaratskhelia. He is unbelievable. What a player. He's called Kvaradona for, well, obvious reasons. And the likelihood of him going to a Real Madrid at this point is extremely high. And Newcastle would probably struggle to convince him to move to St James's Park. However, with the financial muscle behind them, with the Champions League perhaps behind them as well, this is the one that they could go for. We're all waiting for Newcastle to actually make that signing. You know what I'm talking about? The kind of Man City signing Robinho. The moment that the tide turned and people went, oh, hang on a minute. Superstars are arriving. Newcastle have never had, since they've come in, that kind of idea of bringing superstars in. Ashworth and Howe are all about bringing in players they can develop, bringing in players they can bring for good fees, bringing in players that they could perhaps sell on in future and make profit off. Although obviously Newcastle are no longer a selling club, they're still working on that antithesis. They're still working under that kind of guise of making good investments for long-term futures. Kvaradona is 100% a good investment. I mean, many people see him winning the Ballon d'Or in future. Many people think he's one of the best players on the planet right now. That's true, for sure, no doubt about it. But he would be breaking that Newcastle kind of ideal of bringing in that type of player, because he's going to cost a leg and an arm. Let's be realistic. Napoli get their money's worth. We spoke about Benfica and Enzo Fernandez, and Chelsea fans thought they had a hard time, or Benfica drove a hard bargain. They ain't met Napoli yet. I've discussed this with Osimhen as well. Napoli, if they're going to sell him, will get about 130 million euros and they won't budge on that. And it's going to be the same for Kvaradona. This is a thing that Newcastle could be the one. This could be the shirt seller. This could be the one that comes in and is Newcastle's big money signing. However, this, of course, is dependent on so many factors. And I'm not saying it's a done deal. And I'm not saying that Newcastle are 100% going to sign him before you start tweeting out that I said that. I see you. But this is the one that perhaps Newcastle United, Ashworth, perhaps all the board are looking at and going, maybe, just maybe, we could bring the fantasy up a level and bring him in, because we do know they like him, we do know they've looked at him, and we do know that they're, from a distance, thinking about it. And let's be honest, if he arrived at Newcastle, the place would just, gosh, could you imagine? It would be absolutely incredible. So absolutely one to watch. Let's talk about Ivan Toney. Now, this is a bit left field, but Ivan Toney is expected to leave Brentford in the summer. My understanding is there are a number of clubs who are looking at the England international striker. He's an incredibly good player. He's obviously showing himself in a very good light this season. He has probably given all to Brentford that he can. I mean, unless Brentford are going to invest more and push up, that's unlikely. They, again, are a team that are maybe a bit like a Brighton, bringing in players and selling them on. And Tony's going to be one of those ones in the summer who will be subject to bids from multiple clubs, we think. We know he's been watched by the likes of Chelsea and he's on the list of potentials, not at the top, just on the list of potentials. And also could be a nibble from Newcastle too. Now, there's been some links. We understand he's liked, but Newcastle do have Alexander Isak there and they do have Callum Wilson there. And I don't think in Eddie Howe's mind Tony's knocking either of those two off of that perch, especially Isaac, who has been an absolutely incredible acquisition for Newcastle United and has been absolutely superb for them and will be superb for them going forward. So although it might be someone that's on their list, he's not someone that the club are directly looking to bring in at this point in time, is my understanding. I think this needs to be made clear. We often read reports that this player's on the list and this player's on the list. Nothing wrong with those reports, and people say that as that player's getting signed. Making a list of potential targets to being signed is such a distance. That's so far away, and we jump to the conclusion. And I think that's the case with Tony. We know that he's a player that might have been looked at. We know that he's a player that's wanted and will likely leave Brentford. But whether he's for Newcastle at this point in time, from what I'm hearing, I think that is unlikely. But there is one that's becoming increasingly likely, a centre-back. And you might think, well, Newcastle have had one of the best defences in the league. Do they really need to bring in another centre-back? Well, this guy is exactly their type of player. I am talking about Goncalo Inacio, who is the centre-back at Sporting Lisbon. Again, with Urquhart. Our understanding is, and from what we're hearing in Portugal, is Newcastle have actually watched him, have had a look at him and are keen on him. They are not alone again. Newcastle are shopping in a similar market from everyone else. There will be competition for Ignacio's signature, and we're expecting him to leave Sporting Lisbon, an incredibly talented young player. Only 21 years old, like Urquhart. Unbelievably good for his age. In the Portugal squad, Portugal international, already has 2 caps for his country, is only going to get better, is seen as one of the brightest prospects in Europe, and will cost probably around 40 to 45 million. There will be add-ons in that, there will be bonus structures in that, obviously. There could even be bonuses for Sporting should Newcastle make the Champions League if they don't make it this season, go certain distances in the competition, etc. And that would be the same for every club who are going to come in for him. He has interest in Italy, he has interest in Spain, and our understanding is Newcastle are amongst the interest in England. He will leave Sporting Lisbon this summer. Of that, there feels at the moment like no doubt. Contracted again till 2026. Sporting have done well to tie down their young stars at the football club. They might even lose their manager as well, so they need to try and make sure they're getting the maximum investment for these players, for their assets, so that they can replace. Sporting have done well in recent years in replacing and bringing in or nurturing young talent, and Ignacio is one of them. Newcastle have watched him, are looking at him, and he is a potential transfer target for Newcastle United in the summer. It wouldn't surprise us if we see something move on this over the next coming weeks. If we see something move a bit faster on this in the next coming weeks. Our understanding is Ignacio's agent has been in Italy, in Spain, and in London to speak to multiple clubs over the last few weeks. And as the Portugal international, as the young defensive superstar starts to gain more traction, so does the likelihood of him leaving in summer. And Sporting are preparing and have a short list of replacements for both him and Urquhart, by the way, and the manager too, because they're expecting bids. They're expecting people to come in for these talents, and that's not a surprise because they are so good. Whatever happens, whether it's Europa League, Champions League, Europa Conference League, Newcastle United are going to spend money this summer. Any reports that are telling you Newcastle will not spend a lot of money it's just not true. It's just not true, because they had the January where they only signed Gordon and Ashby. Yep, you can argue about the Gordon price, but in retrospect, with what Newcastle have in their bank, it's not a lot of money. They still have quite a wee bit of wiggle room that they want to extend. You're going to see some outgoings at the club too. We can do another part on that as well, that will allow them to stretch that financial fair play wiggle room and bring in more players. Newcastle will spend money this summer. Newcastle will go for it. I think it's going to be the first summer that you'll see the Saudi money, the Saudi backing actually take effect, and Newcastle fans can get excited, because you're already excited, aren't you? You've been at a cup final, you've been to Wembley, you've got the potential of going to Europe, you've been challenging the big boys at the top of the league, and now you're on the periphery of signing some big names and having a big summer, and what is a big future for Newcastle United. Thanks for watching. Like I said, make sure you subscribe, please. It really helps us out. We'll keep making videos. Make sure you like and share with any of your Newcastle pals too. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.